So it's been a year since the Snyder Cut has been released, and to put it mildly, people are still very divided on what it is and how to receive it. Is it better than the Joss Whedon version? Is it worse? Does it matter? Should an auteur be able to release his vision? What does this say about the fandom? So a lot of complicated questions. Unfortunately, at least part of the critics, I think, to put it mildly, just came in here to attack the film preemptively and are coming up with problems which frankly are either very minor or not real problems. And I have no problem with criticizing Snyder. I myself am mixed on certain parts of his films. I think overall he's a very strong director, but it's perfectly fine to criticize him. So if you're going to be in the comment section think I don't really like this or that films, I would agree with you probably half the time. I'm very mixed on certain parts of BVS, very mixed on Watchmen, and of course 300, which has also divided people. But overall, I think he is pretty brilliant, and the Snyder Cut is showing him at his finest. For the most part, it's very, very strong. So now we're going to hear a very stupid critic, and it's so bad I'm going to have to put out two videos because he really has nothing to complain about, and he only raised one legitimate issue in this entire video. But he's going to go on and on about the alleged problems with the Snyder Cut, and fine, I'll deal with them, but they're fairly silly and minor.
To the universe, and the script knows that he's way too overpowered as a character, so they just nerf him at convenient moments whenever they want. Sometimes he'll fall for no reason. There was a point where he saved someone from falling rubble because he's super fast, and then one more piece of rubble falls and he says no, and then Cyborg saves the guy. What was so different about that last falling piece of rubble? In the time you said the word no, you could have dealt with it and had enough time left over to solve world hunger.
So his issue with the Flash, I guess, is the powers are inconsistent. Well, these might be troubling issues if perhaps he didn't understand or note, even though this is very explicit. They repeat this several times. They say this a lot. He's very, very young. He's very, very inexperienced. It's fine to attack Zack for having bad writing, bad editing, bad choices, so on and so forth, but yeah, the Flash not being in total control of his powers, that's not a plot hole. He's still very young, so he's still learning things. Also, he's not invincible. It's not like he's all powerful. He does have limits. He's still human. Now, to be fair, Zack is invoking the comics, where he has access to what's known as the Speed Force. That allows him to do a lot of various abilities, including time travel.
Wonder Woman's trying to grab her sword and she's in slow motion, and the Flash zooms in because he's super fast and he pokes it back to her with his finger on the sharp end, just his bare finger. He's not cut. Apparently this has to do with the electricity or something, but for some reason he can't do the same thing to whatever projectile hits him in this scene. Why didn't the ammunition just bounce off of him like the sword did? I'm sorry, but if he's approaching the speed...
But even there, you have to be a little bit careful because of what he's invoking, what he's not invoking. I'm going to say, okay, I just wanted to look at the film. Well, even with just the film, it's pretty clear he is a kid. He's only been the Flash for a little while. So him not having full control, I don't see the major issue here. As far as the time travel introducing a big dilemma, he does that at the end of the film. People have said this a lot, and it's getting really tiresome. Like, oh no, he's introduced time travel. That creates blah, blah, blah. That creates blah, blah, blah. It literally happens at the very end of the film, and he's still very inexperienced. So there's no major plot hole. There's no major dilemma. People are just making stuff up. And then he says, or how did he get hit by the laser thingies? Because they're going real slow. Well, let's think about this seriously. Because this is somewhat of a serious issue, even in the comics. Namely, well, if the Flash is this fast, shouldn't he be like a complete blur? Like, how do we see him at all? We still see his face and his body, but he's going so fast, so how do we see that? Yeah, I mean, you have to make concessions to the viewer or the reader. We can't see him at all. Now, and by the way, some have acknowledged this. In the Kingdom Come comic, we see the Flash, but we only see little bits and pieces of him because, again, he's just going too fast. So there are ways around it, but at the end of the day, you want to at least see him a little bit. Presumably the editing, for the sake of the viewer, is, quote, showing the lasers as slow, but they're not slow. They're going very, very fast. And even the Flash, yes, you can catch him. If he's not aware, you can hurt him. I don't see any major plot holes or issues. You broke the movie logic. You broke the immersion, Snyder. therefore you have made the worst film of all time. It's like, no, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. The Flash is fine. And then he complains about the character of Wonder Woman, and his major issue is
this is still miles away from The Flash, and this is mostly due to how the soundtrack was incorporated into the film. Every time she shows up on screen, the music abruptly changes to
he didn't like the music that plays when she's on screen. So he didn't like the musical choice. That means the character is bad. Well, again, you can still criticize Snyder for using the music. That's fine, but that didn't tell me she's a bad character. It didn't tell me Gal Gadot's a bad actress. It just told me, I just didn't like the music. I just don't like the music when she's on screen. Okay, that's very well and nice. What the hell does that have to do with anything? You didn't say anything at all. So this video, I'm not joking, is 90% of complete nonsense. It's just brainless idiocy. I mean, fine, you don't like Snyder, you don't like his style, you don't like the Snyder Cut. The only one thing he picked out, which was a legitimate issue, was Cyborg. Like when Cyborg's weapons get out of control when they're reviving Superman. Okay, I agree. That is a major plot contrivance. That is a major problem. I agree. That is really silly and comes out of nowhere. So I agree. That part of the film was very weak. The idea that his weapons would just get out of control. I mean, yeah, that's pretty silly, and that motivates Superman to take them on as a hostile set of enemies, and that forwards the plot. But yeah, I agree. That one was a major problem for me. So I still give the Snyder Cut a 9 out of 10. So I think it is pretty near perfect. But yes, at points Zack did do things which were kind of problematic. I do think I agree. Certain places the plot is a little weak, and he could have done a better job, but overall it's still very strong. The majority of this video is worthless and pathetic, but he did raise at least one legitimate point. But that's about it. Beyond that plot contrivance with Superman reviving, yeah, I agree, that is a problem. That's a totally legitimate problem, and I'll deal with that in due time. But for the most part, he's just blathering nonsense and hasn't really added anything to the discourse on the Snyder Cut.